Hey there, welcome back. Okay, um, we're going to continue for these next two videos on the rigging aspect thing here. And again, this is not. I kind of want to put a caveat here. This is not the only way to rig a character. It's not even the way I rig a character in perfectly. Like, oh, this is how I would do things. This is more of a if you want to get a character and you want to make your own rig instead of using any of the free rigs that are out there. This is the approach here is that you could do this if you just kind of follow along with what I'm trying to do here, and you will not have the world's most awesome rig, but you'll have a character that is yours, that is unique, and that is rigged, and you can animate it, and it will function pretty standardly. Okay, again, you're not going to find groundbreaking results in all of this stuff, and even it's not even the most elegant way to rig a character, but again, we're not, this is not Rigging Dojo, which I'm friends with those guys. I don't know if you guys are familiar with it, but a little plug for Rigging Dojo. If you want to learn rigging, it's a good place to go. They do, much like the APT that I do, um, remote mentors, and they take you kind of where you're at and lead you through some things. They don't pay me to say this. I don't get anything from them. I'm friends with Brad Clark and the other guys who started it. I think it's a great program. So if you're thinking, well, this isn't really anything that appeals to me, or if I want more, or if you want to really get into it, that's a good program to get into. Riggingdojo.com. Dojo spelled D-O. Let me write it out here. Riggingdojo.com. Okay, that's a plug for friends. Again, I don't get paid for any of that stuff because I plug what I believe in. That's why I don't have ads on my site, because you know what, you never really have a lot of control over what comes in there. All right, preambles aside, let's get back into this. What we did the last time is we set up what I call a control structure. All right, we had our model, and using the AB skeleton builder tool, we were able to build out a skeleton, and we were able to then, using this free tools auto rigging kind of processes, we were able to get a joint skeleton and these controllers in there. Now the controllers are kind of pre-baked, these little control curves. All right, you can edit those to be different sizes. Right now, if we turn on the mesh layer, you're like, where's my controls? Well, you have to, you know, the script can't anticipate everything, so you have to kind of do a little bit of homework on your own here to get to where you can actually grab these controls and customize them to your character. So that's the next step. Usually what I'll do is I'll select the curve. It helps to kind of put the character like in template mode so you don't accidentally select the mesh. So you select these little controllers. All right, this is his foot control. Actually, is that it? Yeah, it's part of his foot control. It's kind of got some extra attributes. This is like the real foot control that moves it around. But you want to be able to get this. A couple ways you can do that. You can, and this is total, there's no right or wrong way to do this. This is like, what's your favorite food? There's no right or wrong answer. It's just what works for you. So something that is a primary controller like this, I mean a secondary controller, what I mean is I don't want something that I'm going to grab and expect to move like I just tried to do. Um, this is the one that I want to take precedence because that's the one I'm going to grab the most. So what I want to do is format these in a way that kind of gives me a visual hierarchy of understanding what's a primary controller. This is a primary one because it moves things around primarily. This is a secondary one because its purpose mainly is to just be these extra attributes and stuff like that, which are really handy. Um, some people don't like putting secondary attributes on another controller. Another way of handling it is you could put these same attributes onto this controller and drive those if you want, and then turn this one off completely. I'll leave that to you to explore if that's what you want to do. But for now, we'll keep it simple. But I don't want to make this hard to find. So the easy thing to do is select the curve, hit F8, and it puts you in component mode. Just select it, and you can now move these things around. And I'm going to put them someplace where it's easy to kind of get at it, but it's not going to, really compete for attention with the primary controller. So I'm going to put it on the outside of the foot because it's pretty rare that you're going to have something covering that up. All right, and I'll do the same for this one over here. Just select it, and I'll do the same sort of thing. Kind of put it outside of his heel here, and I'll scale it down so it doesn't, call too much attention to itself. Okay. Now these primary foot controllers, having them behind the heel feels kind of weird to me. When I grab the foot, I want to kind of grab the foot. So what I'm going to do is select these and bring them out here, right on top of the foot, and I'm going to scale it up a little bit so it's easier to grab. Alright, so if I turn character mesh like that, I can kind of say, okay, well there's my foot control, see? And it's easy enough for me to grab it and take a look at it. I'll do the same for this one. Kind of move it forward, scale it up a little bit so it's easy to grab. I tend to have an approach where if I want to animate the foot, I just want my controller to be right there on the foot. I kind of work in a visual hierarchy like that. Okay, real simple. Hit F8 to kind of go out, and see right there. Grab the foot and move it, and these secondary controls are back here. No big deal. The knee controls, you know what? If they're big enough for you and they work, then just leave them where they are. You don't need to make them any bigger or anything. All right, same thing with the elbows. A lot of it, again, is preference. How big do you want these things? You know, if myself, I like to make it just a little bit easier to grab them, so I'll go in F8, scale these up just a little bit, just so that they're a little bit easier to grab. I'll do it with the elbow too, just so they're a little bit friendlier to kind of pick out real quick. Now what we have underneath there is we've got all this stuff in the center, and same deal, so we're just going to go through and do all that stuff. This one right here is, again, a secondary controller. You don't grab it to move the hand, but it's got like all the stuff for, you know, it's got finger attributes on it, and it's got stretch and all kinds of other things on there. So following the same principle that I'd had here with the foot, I'll just go ahead and make a secondary controller, and since it's kind of more for the fingers, I'm just going to put it out here towards the fingers. Just a little something to kind of let me know, hey, there it is. And again, I'll put it, you know, similar color relationship to the hand as these, you know, kind of foot controllers, is just kind of right here next to the hand. And then I'll take this controller right here for the actual hand itself, and I will scale that up and create, you know, put it in such a shape so that it's easier to grab. If I put this in that mode, I just want to check it, make sure it's easy to grab, and it's right there on the character. Just do a little something here. There, simple enough. Alright, and so the secondary ones are right there. I'll do that on this hand as well. Got to pop in there, select that, rotate it, move it out a little bit, just so it's kind of similar. Kind of down here by the back part of the hand. Doody-doo. And take this dude right there. That's sometimes what happens when you do a drag select. You kind of select a whole bunch of things. Just, if you do that, spin your rotate your view so you just get the one you want. And, you know, you can be as particular as you want about this, to make them exactly the same size, whatever, and it's, you know, it's just a level of, you know, just how picky you want to be. Myself, yeah, I'm not too terribly worried about it. So there you go. Okay. So quickly, we're just kind of blocking in some things. Now, it's kind of hard to find these red controllers on top of his red body. Well, you can change that a couple of ways. You could change the color of his body, but he's a red character, so I don't want to do that. What you could do is you can change the color, the display color of these things. You may say to yourself, well, how do you do that? Well, there's scripts to do it. I got, you can look at for them on like high-end 3D. What? Sorry, I keep calling it that. CreativeCrash.com. Here's one called, it's down here, WP Control Box Color by whatever this guy's name is. If I scroll out, William Petrocelli. Hopefully I'm not ruining your name there, William. It's a neat little thing, just gives you some options. So you just select this thing, and I'm just going to make these guys green. They're easier to find. Green. Oops, not that. Select this one. Green. So anything that's a red controller, I'm just going to make it green so it's easier to pick. Make my life simpler, right? Green. It's a different kind of green than the multiple select green. It's a slightly different shade. So Just something to make it easier to hand grab a hold of. And I'll keep that over here in case I need to use it again. Now we go in here to this mode. Now this is a little low hip controller. It's kind of like the independent little sassy hips, you know, where somebody can do their little butt wiggle. A good place for that is down where his butt is. So I'll just take that and kind of pull it so it's hanging down there. Alright. Hopefully nothing too vulgar for anybody. Alright, and then this right here is his low spine control. But that thing right there, that's his cog. That's like his root. That's his major main control thing. So again, F8, take these, just scale it up so it's easy to grab. And this one right there, it's you may say to yourself, well, why does he have two controls right on top of each other? Well, this one just does, it's like a localized version of this thing right there. This takes you'll notice that the hip one down here, above and below it, both move when I move this one, whereas this one right here only from there up works. So it's a neat little bit of control. But I don't want it right on top of this one right here, even though its center point is the same. So what I do is I go F8 and I kind of pull it up a little bit so I'm understanding that it is really more of something that is from the upper body up sort of thing. Now he made this an ellipse. You can change that, just scale it differently so it fits your character. Alright, and that's what I'll do. And you can move these things around, these control points, and it doesn't affect the center pivot of the actual object. It's just changing the way the curves are displayed. And you do that with all of these. You know, just select each of these things and just scale them so that they fit your character so you can see them. Again, there are plenty of other ways to show character control feedback. This is just one of them. And it's, tried and true and old and tested. It works. Some people are like, I hate curves. Well, that's fine. Do something different, There's lots of different ways to do this. This is just a nice fun way for folks to just get into something they can use. Alright, now there's a lot of controllers on his spine. You may not end up using them all, which is fine. The reason why I used so many spine joints and in the auto rigging tool then made a lot of spine controllers. The reason why I use so many spine joints is because when we get to skinning him, you'll thank me later. Trust me, you will thank me later when I decided to use more of them, because if you're like me and you hate painting skin weights, the method we're going to use to skin this guy is going to be super friendly. Alright, not perfect, but friendly. Right, this right here I think is his head controller. Yeah, that's his head controller. That's his neck controller. His neck, I may not ever use his neck because he doesn't really have one, He barely has a head. So the neck controller, I'm not going to use it, most likely. I don't generally use neck controllers, even on characters that do have necks, because try and watch people move just their neck. That's really, really hard. We're not built that way. So I generally use upper chest and a head controller and let the neck kind of play its way into it. I will use a neck controller if it's a very serpentine character, or he has an extremely long neck. Then you need to have control for that. But for most part, I'm not going to worry about it, so I'm not going to scale that up. And in fact, if anything, I'm going to choose, I don't want this one at all. I'm going to scale it way down so that it just doesn't even become a factor. I don't even see it. Don't even bother with it. And you get around to it, I can even hide it. The attribute for its visibility is off right there, but I can still hide it. All right, I'm not worried about it. You can do that. Rigging is just as open-ended as animation. There are no rules. It's just what works for you. Alrighty, so we'll take his head controller, F8, select the CVs, and we'll scale it up in such a way that we can actually see it and control and use his head. And we'll rotate it and put it in a place that's kind of fun and appropriate for him as well. Do-de-do-de-do. Alright, there's his nice head controller. Doesn't need to be that far back. I like to make them relatively close to the body. It makes them easier to work with. Alright, so there's his head controller. It's kind of like a horse collar. Okay. And then in here there are a few other controllers that we've got to grab. My keyboard's not very good at expressing stuff. Now this right here, this is a spine split control, all kinds of things. I mean, this has a lot of extra attributes in it. Um, what this does is it controls, and it's actually a pretty neat control. It's pretty fantastic if you think about it. It allows you to choose how you distribute the deformation across the splits. It's actually a fantastic idea. It's one of the things I like a lot about this auto rigging solution is, let's say you've got an arm twist. Well, the easiest way to do that is when you build the character, you put a lot of splits in there. So you got you got the main bone for the lower arm, but that's not just what you skin. You got this little bone right here is kind of hard to get. So let's go ahead and take his radius, take it down, so it's easier to grab these other ones. You got this one and this one, oops, and this one, oops, this one, and this one. We're using a lot of extra joints here. Take the radius on those up a bit. This will help later when we want to skin anyways. Well, I can control this little bit right here. How much this one spins is more, the closer it is to this joint, or to this controller right here, wanting to do its thing, the more it wants to kind of distribute the rotation and stuff. Okay, well, that little extra controller that's down in here in the body, you're probably not going to ever really animate that, but if you need to adjust your rig and say, well, this one's spinning too much and this one's spinning too much, you can select this controller right there and select how much things are spinning and stuff like that. So it's kind of a neat little control. Again, you probably won't ever use it outside the original setup. Stuff like this locator and everything like that, you can hide that, but then well, actually, looks like his visibility is driven probably by the FK-IK switch on the hand here. If we go to the IK blend, goes to forward, yeah, it turns off that little thing. So we'll leave it on, no big deal. And let's see, there was these things right here. These are the little shoulder controls that rotate the shoulders up and down. They're kind of hidden in there. So again, F8, grab those, grab it, pull it out here, just so it's easier to see. And I'll rotate it just so it looks like it's part of the character. And I'll do the same on this side right there. Pull him out, rotate it over a little bit. So there you go, little shoulder controls. Nothing great. So this is all part of just making the rig something that you're happy with using. These have no color on them. So what I'll do is I'll just make these using this little color thing. I'll make this one blue and I'll make this one green so that they show up. Okay. So we have kind of a neat little color convention here. The white one is the big one down the middle. All these yellow ones kind of help, do the offset and stuff like that. Now, you may not want to use each of these little controllers. In fact, this one's a shaper. It's a different kind of controller. It doesn't rotate. It just shapes how the spine offset works. And this one right here is more of your kind of traditional FK type controller. And this one is also more of your FK type controller. This one's kind of like an FK-IK one, which is kind of neat. Again, a neat little feature of the rig. This one is also kind of an FK-IK one. It does some stretching. This one right here, now that I have it, I forgot that it's not really your typical spine control the way you think of it. So I don't want to be confused every time I rig this, grab this character animate. I don't want to be confused by that controller. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of give myself a little bit of a visual reminder that this is not your typical FK type spine control. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull it back out here and I will rotate it to be more kind of straight up and down, and I'll just scale this thing into more or less a circle and just kind of leave it back here off of his back. And this will just give me a kind of like a visual hint. It's a different type of controller that does different types of things. Okay, so this is more of oops, don't grab the joint. So this is more of just your basic FK-IK type stretchy spine thing. This one right here is kind of similar. This one right here doesn't really do anything. It's just rotate only. All right. But this one right there is translate only. It only pulls those joints off in such a way to handle it. This one is kind of different. Okay. This guy right here does translates and rotates. You can get into a visual language and say, okay, I'll translate, and you can do this with any kind of rig. This is kind of like rigging, you know, obsessive compulsive organization disorder. But you could say, okay, any object that is a rotate only controller looks a certain way. One that is a translate only looks another certain way. One that is translate and rotate looks another way. You can make a visual language so that anybody coming into the rig, once they understand certain things, but use a rig long enough, you know the rules. Alright, so that's pretty much most of all that. We've got our character so that his controls kind of fit where he's after, and we're pretty happy with it. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and hit save on this. I'll wait for the disk to spin up so that we can actually save it. Alright, good job. So there we are with that. Now let's get into the skinning bit. Okay, now skinning is when you know, take these joints and cause them to deform this mesh right there. Okay, there are ways to do this that are painful, and there are ways to do this that are less painful. There is no way to do this that is painless. Okay, that's just the truth of things right now. If there is a way to do this, well, there is a way to do this painless. Hire somebody else to have the pain for you, and that's generally what happens in the world. The one thing that you want to do before you skin this is you do want to know that you want to have a decent UV mapping, because the way the skinning works is it actually just bakes the deformation into an image that is stored, and you can export it and re-import it later. That's what all those neat little export tools do. And that's when you paint skin weights, all you're doing is you're editing the image, saying this joint influences, you know, using this black and white image to, like an alpha channel, to decide how much I want to apply to a particular mesh, blah, 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 blah. Alright, so before you do skinning, it's a good idea to have your character UV'd out in a way that is reasonable. As you can see, he's got, you know, both feet are UV'd the same. So, you know, I could break this out so that each foot is its own UV and each arm is its own UV. I may do that, but for now, this is good enough. Okay, it's not a great UVing job. This, you know, I'm not going to get into what that's all about. Okay, there's a couple of ways you can do this. You can use the Maya skinning, which is let's bring back my full. Let me bring up my all of my UI stuff, UI elements. So let's get a status line, and I don't need the toolbox. And the help line, sure, we'll do that. Why not? Okay, and I'll also do hotbox controls, window options, show menu bar. Okay, so I got the main menu bar there. What you do is you go to the animation section and you get the skin menu. Okay, you can do that little tear off right there, and that's all well and good. And there's kind of two kinds of skinning. And stop me. Well, hit fast forward if you heard this before. There's rigid binding and soft binding, or smooth binding. What's the difference? Rigid binding says every vertex on this mesh will only ever have one object influencing it. Okay, that's what a rigid binding is. It can't be blended. It's binary. You are either with this joint or you are some other joint, but you can't be partially this one or partially that one. Smooth binding is you can have any number of influences on a given vertex. If you look at your options, you can choose that, you know, right there, max number of influences. 3 is a good number for most things. If you really need to solve a lot of stuff, if you like painting weights, make it 5, 6, whatever. You know, high-end stuff may be needing more, but 3 is a good, for simple characters, a good way to go. But we're not going to use Maya skinning, and that's because there are better methods out there. All right, one is a free, yes, I said free plugin, which I use all the time. And you can download it again off of creativecrash.com. I've got that website up over here. I'm going to bring it over here. It's called PM Heatweight Maya script. Okay, his version number, the latest one, as the time of this movies being made is 0.6. And he shows you right here the difference between Maya's skin binding, and the heat map, or the heat weight one. A heat mapping is a really advanced mathematical computation that I can't explain any more than that. All I know is it works better. It's just smarter about how to assign um, influences to deformation objects. Maya is distance based. Okay, heat mapping is density based. That's the best thing that I can tell you about. It just kind of figures out density wise. And I can't to say anymore is to make myself out to be a fool, because I'm sure to be wrong. Anyways, it's a combination plug-in and a script. Download it for free, creativecrash.com, and just do a search for PM heat weight. You'll come up with it. Install it. It's got some neat stuff to it. It shows you how to use it, but it's really, really fantastic. Okay, the reason why is it's easy to use. Usability is simple. What you do is you grab the root, and you grab the mesh, and then you run the script. Okay, so it comes with a little icon here. I just put it on my shelf of deformation tools, all these other ones I have, and you just grab the root, grab the mesh, run it. It's going to ask you, which do you prefer, undoable or faster? Completely up to you. I use faster, and it runs this other program that you install, and you're done. The reason why I like having a lot of joints is because I have found with the heat mapping, the more joints there are, the better it blends. And painting skin weights is all about blending, because sometimes you get some goofy blending. Sometimes things just kind of kink real bad, and you get dish ragging and all that stuff. I found through various experimenting that with heat mapping, the more joints, the more you spread things out. Now, the nice thing with the thing like the AB skinner or the skeleton builder is it kind of builds in these arm splits and the high number of spine joints and all that stuff. It's like you're getting and but it figures out the controls for you, so you don't have to try and reverse engineer that stuff. It builds it in there, but it doesn't affect the actual control of the character. But by putting these extra these extra joints and splits and stuff in there, you get something that, I mean, that skins out pretty nice. It's pretty rare to get something where your shoulders behave as well as those shoulders are. Now, there's a little bit of, ballooning and mushrooming down under here, under his arm, and, we will paint some skin weights to fix some of that stuff. But, I mean, as a general rule, that's pretty nice solutions right there. Some of it is not blending out as nicely as I'd like. Some of that is my modeling is really crud. But we have some solutions to that. Okay, so we'll move this down. We'll kind of undo it. It's pretty nice. Now you notice it didn't grab these things, but those we don't really need to worry too much about. We can just use standard Maya skinning for stuff like these little thumbnails. So what I'd do then is I'll just grab that, and then I go to, let's do skin, and I'll do bind skin, smooth bind with options, and I'll use selected joints so it doesn't grab the whole hierarchy to try and skin just this thumbnail, alright, and closest distance, and just hit bind skin, and then just do that with each of these fingers. How you do that is really depending on your model, but that's, the model is going to dictate to you how you're going to go out and do this, but I know that in this instance this will be sufficient. For the fingers, it's just grabbing this one joint here at the end and just smooth binding them to this last finger in the chain, and one last one for those. Okay, and then also his horns don't go with him, so I'll take his head joint and his horn and that horn, and I will just smooth bind those. So now what you get here is some weird goofiness. You'll notice that the head does not move as much as the horns do. Well, that's because we're using two different skinning solutions. So that tells me that I need to use the same skinning solution that the body's using, the heat map one, to move the horns the right amount. You could do it that way, which is fine. It may not be perfect, so let's go ahead and try it, see what we think. Again, the same thing. You got to go back to the root, select your thing, heat map it faster, and we'll try it with just one horn to see how that looks. Not perfect. Still slides off of it a little bit. So we will then use something different. Oh, I just did the thing that wasn't undoable, that's why. Okay, so simple enough. We just take his skin cluster underneath them. Oh, here's a neat thing if you're not a rigger, you don't understand. In the channel box, whenever you select something, you got all these attributes that you understand as an animator. These are all the inputs. So these are all the things used to model him or anything like that. Skin cluster, that's what's driving the joint driving that mesh. You can actually just select that. I select it usually by copying, pasting, and putting its name up here in some selector thing, or because it's kind of a hassle to get at that, you can also use like the hypergraph. You can use connections or hierarchy. I never liked it. There was a period where hypergraph crashed to me many years ago, so I got in the habit of using the texture hyper shade as a way of looking at my connections in Maya. It's really weird. You think, but it's for texture work. But the neat thing is, it works just like everything else too. Well, this here is connecting to all the joints, and it's pretty drastic. This skin cluster 08 is pretty nutty. But I can take that and I can delete it and not worry about it. And so what I have then is that's not going anywhere. So to do the horns, we'll do those much like we're going to do the eyes and other stuff in a little bit. Okay, so we'll get to that in a little bit when we do the face, because I use a way to do in face controllers, which is pretty handy. Okay, so here's our character. He's not perfect, and you will have to paint some skin weights on him, to get him to play nice. But for the most part, he behaves pretty well. He kind of dish rags in a few places and stuff like that. But you just have to paint out some weights and make things a little bit better. Like here, you don't really want his heels to be affected by that other stuff. So even though the heat mapping is smarter, it's not super smart. So here's the fun part. I don't know if you've ever done it, but this is the tedious bit that doesn't get any better. It's just, well, it doesn't ever go away. It just gets better. You select your mesh, and you go under Skin, Edit, and use your Paint Skin Weights tool. Alright? This is a nasty, fun little thing. It's pretty horrible. But what I will do, and different people work different ways. Again, there's ways that work for you. For myself, generally what I will do is I will lock out anything that I'm not trying to affect. What I mean by that is toggle this. It's kind of like locking influences, because if you have stuff that's kind of spread all over the place, like we do here, because we got a lot of joints, so a lot of joints are affecting a lot of vertices. What Maya doesn't really give you a good indicator of is when you paint one down, it's changing all the other ones affecting that joint. So if I were to kind of diagram that for you, here's how it looks. You have this vertex, okay? So you have a CV on the mesh, and it's being influenced, let's say, by 3 joints, because that's what my settings were. So it's got 3 different joints, and let's say each one of them is affecting that vertex 0.33%. Okay? Well, you go in there and you say, well, I don't want this one to be so much. I'm going to change this one to 0.2. Okay? Well, then these are going to have that 0.13 that was taken off, and it's going to split it in half, so that you're going to end up with 0.065 being added to each of these things. So now you're going to have 0.4 or 0.395. Okay? And this becomes 0.395. So far, so good. Well, that's all well and good if all of these 3 joints are from the same general body area. Okay? But the way skinning works a lot of times is you're going to have something from the spine. In this instance, we have our root affecting your foot. Okay? Well, you could get into some real trouble where if you change the foot and then all of a sudden you start moving your character's midriff around and there's like a a part that's missing because the foot is affecting back up in the spine. It's really kind of goofy. So that's why I lock stuff down. And there's a lot of joints, so I just kind of think of the one I want to deal with. The spine low. Cool thing here is if you turn on X-ray joints, you'll see which one it is. The spine low joint is like the root. Okay, so that one seems to have some effect all over the place. So what I want to do is I want to lock off everything from like the hands and stuff up because I just want to fix the feet here. So I will go ahead and the mid joint, I'll lock that. The high joint, lock that. Anything as I selected in the list, if it's above his waist, I'm just gonna hold its value for right now. Guy joint, clavicle I don't care about, up arm I don't care about, arm split 1, 2, elbow, wrist, hand, all the thumb joints. Kind of a tedious, but this is rigging, right? You may say to yourself, why do people even want to become riggers? I don't know, because it's kind of neat to be able to, it's like a puzzle to solve. Each time you do one, it's a new puzzle. So that's kind of fun. Clavicle, blah blah blahs, all this stuff. Okay. The thumbs. So by putting all these things on hold, and there are mail scripts out there that do this all like for you automatically. You can search them out. One of these days I will go ahead and make for myself probably, a tool that does a lot of this stuff more automatically. But for now, I'm just kind of explaining my way through it, and you get to listen to me rattle on. Hooray! Okay, the hip joint. We kind of like the hip joint. That's probably the one that's given us some issues down here. I'm going to turn off the grid so we don't have to deal with it. And let's go ahead and do that. Oops. Actually, I don't want that. I want the tool thing. Well, okay, whatever. I'm trying to make it easier to see. Okay, so the hip joint, I want this to be nothing. I don't want this. Your opacity is like if you're brushing stuff, how much it's applied. I don't generally work with it at 1 because a lot of times it's pretty drastic. So I set it somewhere smaller and just use more brush strokes. A tablet helps. And another cool little trick, if you want to see your rigging influences, just set some keys on these controllers. Alright? Just so you can see how things are being affected. So take this one, we'll set a key there. We just need to remember to get rid of these later. Take this guy and we'll snap it back there. And then here we'll just, from 21 to say 30, we will kind of give his hips a little bit of a wiggle here, just to see if we're fixing the problem that we have. Okay, so what we can do here is we got some diagnostic motion. That's it. So now what you can do is come back here and use your skin weight tool again. Skin weights tool. We can kind of scrub our way through this and see, how we're fixing things. Right here, we're going to go. What we want to fix is this thing on the heel. So as it does this, we'll just get in here and we want whatever is causing this to happen to go away. Well, that's generally because if it's going up because the hip's going up, there's probably going to be a hip controller or something like that, or a spine that's going to cause that problem. So here what I'm going to do is I'm going to set to replace and the value to be 0. That means I'm going to paint black right here. And it doesn't seem to be doing anything, so I'll go ahead and I'll just, for fun, I'll just crank up the opacity. Nope, that's not the one doing anything. So is it the upper left leg? Nope, it's not that. Something tells me it might be that one right there. Nope, not that. And this really is how it goes. You have to kind of find what's causing your problems. If you want to, a little quicker, you can go in F8, select the actual control vertex that's being affected the way you don't like, and go under Window, General Editors, Component Editor, And this will give you a really tedious looking spreadsheet of what is affecting this thing. Okay? What's affecting this is the knee joint. That right there. Well, that's not really something I don't want my knee to affect my heel. So you can paint it, or what you can do is you can change the numbers in here. Alright? Some people find the numbers easier to work with, some people find the painting easier to work with. I tell you so that you can figure out which one you want to do. For me, numbers don't scare me. So let me go ahead here and just scrub this. So all of these things right here are being affected by something that I don't want it to be affected by, probably the knee. So I'm going to go ahead. If I set them to 0, I find that a lot of times Maya doesn't like that, so I set it to 0.001, which is effectively 0, and it just spreads that across the other joints. There's a little bit of play in there from the knee, but it's imperceptible. If I set it to 0, sometimes Maya doesn't do a good job of spreading the data very well. So because you're taking something out of the list, and if this is where it gets kind of weird. And I'm sure I'm going to have rigging people tell me, that's not how it works. You guys are right, I'm wrong, okay, because that's the way it always is. I don't pretend to be a super expert on this stuff. I just go from experience. But I have found in my experience that if this particular control vertex is expecting 3 joints to affect it, and then I suddenly turn that into a list of 2 joints because I'd made all these 0, sometimes Maya will say, oh, well, I need 3, and it will start borrowing influences from some other joint from somewhere, and I have no control over that. Now, that may be an old problem, but I've been working with Maya for 10 plus years. Things that gave me problems in 2002, I still avoid. Even though they may have been fixed in 2006, I've worked around them, I still avoid them. Call me an old man, that's what I am. But anyways, you may or may not find that easier to deal with. The numbers versus the painting. I find the numbers to be a lot less problematic in a lot of ways. So it's also very quick to just grab all these things and say, I know for sure that on my feet, I don't want anything other than feet joints really affecting them, especially these ones right here. There's no need for the knee to be involved at all. So what you can do to change a whole bunch of them is you select the name in the list right here, okay? You could go down and go, change each of these one by one to 0.001, but that would be silly. You can select it and then shift select the first one in the list, type the value you want, and everything that's selected, it goes all the way down that column, will get fixed. Okay? So now when we move his body around, you'll notice there's very, very little, if any, movement in the foot. Fantastic. That's really what we want to do. So fixing skin weights is really just a matter of diagnosing where your problem's coming from and then doing something about it. All right? There's different ways to do that. Here we're going to use the knee joint. We don't want anything from the knee joint involved practically. Okay? There's some slop down here. So maybe down here we can go ahead and let's get bold. Let's get nutty. Let's go ahead and just make it 0. Oh, look at that. Mine actually behaved. Pretty cool. I think it behaved. Go F8. If I move this around, yeah, I'm not leaving any points behind. When I bend the foot, weird things don't happen. So, hey, maybe it's my old workflow ways are not necessary. So anyways, there's a couple ways you can do that. You can do the numbers in a spreadsheet, which I don't find problematic. Or you could, paint things, whichever works better for you. For simple, broad areas that you know are exclusionary, like I don't want anything affecting my feet except the feet joints, the spreadsheet's really simple. Where you're getting into things like, how stuff blends across the body, painting for me ends up working a little bit better, just because of a finer level of control. I do know that for this part of the body, I don't want the arms to affect any of this stuff in the middle. So I will go into F8 and I will select pretty much all of this stuff except for the arms. I will deselect the arm CVs because I do want the arms to affect those things, of course. But what I'm going to do here is that problem that we had where when you lifted the arms his stomach started to kind of stretch out and stuff like that. We're gonna try and get rid of that. Right underneath the arm, I'm gonna keep it because I think it's good to keep that stuff. Always be sure to check the backside of your character to make sure that you're not selecting CVs and things on the other side that are problematic for you. And yeah, keep that one. And looks like we're kind of equal. So simple enough. Open up our little spreadsheet here, window, general editors, component editor. There's a lot of joints involved here, even though I told it to just do 3, but that's because there's so many parts of the body selected here. I'm just going to look for anything that has to do with hand or arm. So this left up arm stuff right here, I really don't want the left up arm to really affect this stuff that much. I want to maybe paint this back in later. This is another reason why I use the 0.001. If you take it out of the list and then later on you're like, oh geez, I need that back, you can't put it back. You've taken it out of the list and you'll never be able to get that joint to ever affect that vertex again, ever. By setting it to 0.001, you leave yourself a little bit of an escape route, like, oh my gosh, I was overzealous in making sure my skins all were this, and it turns out, you know, this upper arm, I really do need that to affect this area some. And I'll get in there, I'll paint that, but if you set this to 0 and it takes it out of the list, you can't ever paint it back in. So that's another reason to kind of go with the 0.001. A lot of these are already 0, so I could just do bunches of these to set them to 0.001. 0.002 is practically the same. Where you start getting into some things a little bit differently, like these are all pretty small. Look for ones that are like closer to 0.1 and stuff like that to change it. So there's the up arm splits and stuff like that. So I'll just take all of these up arm split things and change them all to 0.001. Alright. And then I'll also look for anything up in here that says arm or, see, right arm. I want all these to be, again, 0.001 is practically the same as 0. It's not, but it's for the purposes of setting things up. You can go and change it to 0 later once you're sure you're happy with it. Let's see, so that's it. I just wanted to take the arms and get them out of this influence list for these joints, or for these CVs. So now when I raise his arms around, his belly doesn't start pulling off like before. So that's a quick way to fix that. There is some wonkiness here. It still affects these areas. So this is where you'd want to go ahead and you'd want to kind of paint that. Alright, so you would use your paint weights tool, and we can fix this. What joint would this be? That would be the left up arm. We can just use this as a smoothing brush to kind of give ourselves a little bit of love, but I'm going to turn off the toggle hold on these things so that we can spread this around a little bit. Up arm joint, split 2. Okay, and we'll also take our spine ones and we will change those from hold to be editable, so that later on we can kind of, so we can get some stuff in there. So if I look at the clavicle joint, that's fine. The up arm joint, smoothing is kind of nice because it helps kind of blend things out a little bit. But I need to add some here, so you choose add and give it a value. What you're doing is saying I'm making this whiter. When I make it whiter, I allow it to kind of move a little bit. So because we want some movement here, just not a ton. And if it's too much, you kind of use smooth and just kind of blend it a little bit. So, you know, just try and make the motion blend into the body a little bit. Okay. If your brush is too small, hold down B and left mouse click. You can change the size of your brush. Okay. That helps. So if you want to do a larger area all at once, that kind of comes in handy. And this is really what you do. You just kind of smooth this stuff out and you say, yeah, we're gonna kind of just make this play a little bit nicer. And so now you can come over here, you move that around, and that blends a little bit nicer. Now the upper arm is messing with the head up here. you're going to have to do the same thing there. I'm showing you principles. I'm not going to do the whole character on screen because that would take a while. Rigging takes time, just like animation. And it takes a while to do it. So to have you sit here and watch me do it would be a bit of a torture. So that's the basic concepts behind just getting your character quickly set up. All right? And you can get into varying levels of, detail and fidelity on a lot of these things. That's up to you how far you want to go. But I'm just trying to give you something that you can go with that makes the job just as simple as possible, as friendly as possible, using tools that are free and relatively straightforward. And hopefully that helps you out. Okay, so that's where we're at with this one. Next one, we're going to set up some real basic face stuff. Again, doing it a different way than a lot of people suggest, using another free tool, which can be a little clunky, but it's actually pretty neat. So we'll get into that. And it's not the simplest way to do faces, but it's a very interactive way of doing faces. So it's different, okay? And you can kind of take it from there and say, Keith, that's the stupidest thing in the world, and I want to do it, the way Jason Osipa does it. Well, Jason's system is really, really good, and he's got a book on it. You can buy it, and Jason, will love you for buying his book, and you can use the rig, and people love it. I'm just going to show you a different way, all right? So there you go. We're all set on this one. Till next time, well, be good.